Steve is also okay.
I'll say this once. Good morning, Steve. Thank you for joining us here today. It's an absolute pleasure to have you with us for our 13th episode of Recharge Talking New Energies.
Great to see you. 13th episode, unlucky for some.
and lucky for others.
And lucky for others.
So, Steve, for those in the audience who don't know who Steve Melhuish is, perhaps you could just give us a bit of a brief overview of your journey, summary of yourself, I guess the kind of LinkedIn profile in a comprehensive way, if you will.
Okay, where do you want me to start?
Well, you take it in a direction that you feel is best going to give people an idea of how you started to how you got to where you are and what's next.
Okay. Yeah, I guess I grew up as an army brat. My father was in the army, so that basically meant moving around, new home, new school, new friends every 2 years. And I'm sure that had some kind of deep psychological impact on me, positive and negative, I think. It certainly didn't do any good for my schooling because I remember my mum being called into school, being told by the headmaster or the teacher that I was going to be a failure in life.
So
And I then delivered the 3 Ds at A level just to prove the point. Yes, academically not strong, but my father was in the communications side of the army, signals. So as I was thinking a little bit about what I want to spend time on, I was thinking about computer science versus telecoms, and it showed my age now, but in the late 80s, telecoms was an interesting area. It was starting to change quite a lot, and so I chose a communications engineering course. Worked really hard. That was 80% dropout rate on that course, and managed to survive because the entrance rates were so low to get here. It was 2 Ds. I had 3 Ds, so I was way overqualified.
And then people realised, oh, this is actually quite good.
Yeah, so you couldn't get into anything else. You did that course, and of course, so many people dropped out. But I managed to survive and end up with a 2-1 degree. And I went into telecoms about a year afterwards. It was in the middle of a recession in the UK. So interest rates were like 14-15%, and unemployment rate was like 20%. Strikes happening, it's chaos in the country. But so finding a job in that environment was very hard. And but I landed a job in a new telecoms company, and that new telecoms company was competing with an incumbent in the UK. So it's a company called Mercury, and I love the fact that this was it's a David versus Goliath, because it's a massive company, British Telecom, monopoly. There's like a few hundred people trying to take on this big giant. And I through various iterations, and also through an acquisition that a company called Cable Wireless did, acquired this company, became a large company. I spent 10 years in telecoms in a corporate environment, and I absolutely loved it, and I learned a lot because in those days, the 90s going into 2000s, telecoms was going for a massive revelation and transformation. And so you had fiber optics being rolled out, submarine cables being rolled out around the world. You had broadband starting, you had voice over IP starting, mobile, GSM networks being launched in the 90s. So mobile was starting, mobile data was starting. So a lot of innovation going on. I was very, very fortunate that I was able to play a role in terms of, as these new businesses were being developed, playing a leading role in shaping some of them in the commercial world, and eventually leading some of these global businesses. So my global clients were internet companies, were content companies, were the second tier telecoms operators taking on in Germany, France, Japan, the incumbents, and then also brand new mobile operators take on monopolies. So in markets, you have 2 or 3 telecoms companies coming up and fighting against monopolies as well. And I absolutely love that. It was a massive time with innovation, new technology taking place on the back of the internet boom. The telecoms was booming as well. And then obviously what happened was the telecom bust happened. And then I spent about 2 years rather than building businesses and teams, actually dismantling my team. So yes, exactly. So my clients were all going into chapter 11 at various stages and becoming bankrupt, and I was trying to grow my business whilst my company, my customers were declining. And so it was a very, very challenging time, and ended up having to cut my team every 6 months or so. And I learned a lot through that process, you know, and some of the most memorable, if not from a positive point of view, but from a negative point of view, how to handle a crisis and how to manage, you know, downsizing the team and how to manage that in a very respectful way, but a very painful way. I learned a lot at that time. So I had a great time in that 10 years of early, you know, telecoms boom and bust. Absolutely loved it. I had a fantastic, you know, early boss and mentor who really just gave an enormous amount of freedom and trust and accountability, but also protecting me from some corporate red tape and also politics in the organisation, until I started going up the ladder and got further and further and further away from the customer. And that was interesting. You know, I kind of spent more time internal facing, more time, you know, managing my own career and how I looked to the rest versus my peers, and became, you know, it was quite cutthroat, quite political, quite bureaucratic. I really didn't enjoy that. I enjoyed building stuff. I didn't enjoy dismantling. I didn't enjoy the politics and the red tape and the bureaucracy. So as this process was going on, I kind of felt a bit tired. So I basically managed to persuade my CEO to allow me to take 6 months off to recharge my batteries. But my intention was never to go back. I wanted to change. So I went traveling around Southeast Asia for 6 months, backpacking essentially, staying at $1 or $2 a night places, and do all that. So I got 3 or 4 or 5 weeks in each country around Southeast Asia with my girlfriend and now wife. And it's probably one of the, it was the best thing ever in my life. It was the freedom to be able to wake up one day and decide what you wanted to do, to go and see amazing wildlife, nature, history, diversity, you know, and also massive amounts of poverty on our doorstep here in Southeast Asia, in Singapore, right? Just not that far away, an hour and a half flight away. You know, people living on, you know, $1 or $2 a day, with no housing, electricity, or schooling. So it was extremely humbling, but fantastically rewarding as well to be able to do that. And it's one of the things I kind of encourage anyone to take the opportunity. If you have the opportunity, just take some time off and just go and rediscover yourself a little bit.
How old were you at the time?
That's what I was reasonably old. I was, you know, at the height of my career, and I was running a $500 million P&L. You know, I'd sort of climbed to the director level. I was interfacing with the CEO and the board, and it was a big role that I was running and managing. But you know, I knew it was time to do something different. So yeah, mid-30s, probably 33, 34, I guess, at that stage.
It's an interesting time to kind of step back from the career, isn't it? Because for many people, as you just said, that was kind of when you're really ramping up. Yeah. But then decide, well, hold on, I just want to step back from this completely. It's been involved. Yeah. Well,
I didn't at that stage. You know, I wasn't totally on board with stepping back completely. And it took me, I remember some of the fear that I had making this move, because in my mind, having spent 10 years building a career where I was now in a very senior role, in a large business I was running, taking a step back, or taking a step out of the business, seemed to me like very, very high risk. Yeah. I felt 6 months is a long time, and we're going to get, we're going to get a job when I come back. How would people regard the fact you're taking a 6 month break? All that reasons not to do were very, very strong. I did it, but I was extremely nervous, extremely stressed about doing it. What I realised was, during that 6 months, after the 6 months, was actually 6 months goes in the blink of an eye. I was meeting people who have been travelling for 1, 2, in many cases longer already, 2 years. It's a really, really short space of time. It's a blink of an eye. And nothing, not a single thing had changed when I got back. I was talking to the friends for 6 months, I hadn't seen them for 6 months, they're still talking about the same things, still talking about the same TV shows, they're still doing exactly the same job. Nothing had changed. 6 months is a blink of an eye. So it seems like a long time, but actually reality is so fast.
I think it was just more about going against the grain. Especially, I think this would have been early 2000s?
Yeah, it was 2002, 3 time.
I can't imagine it was quite common for people to take those sabbaticals, essentially, which is what it was. Sabbatical. Well,
good on them doing it, but also, I guess, it was a real opportunity, because it gave me time to think about what I really, really enjoyed doing, what I really wanted to do. When I reflected, what I've been doing up to that point was building businesses around technology within a corporate. And I was fortunate as part of the redundancy package I managed to negotiate to have a careers counselor for 12 weeks. And through that process, what came out was the profile actually, all you've been doing and all you enjoy doing is being an entrepreneur, just happens to be in the company, it's building businesses and trying to solve problems, in this case within the business. So maybe you should think about being an entrepreneur. I didn't know what an entrepreneur was even in those days. But then I ended up setting my first business up, which was helping other corporates to innovate and helping startups to raise funding and to grow in the tech industry, in the telecoms industry. So helping corporates to launch their mobile services, internet services, their fixed line services, helping startups to raise funding and to grow and to hire. Post internet boom and bust, there was a re-emergence of the new internet companies. So it was fascinating. So I had a whole bunch of companies, and I was very fortunate. Got to work with Skype. There was about 10 people in a small shop house in Soho in London, because they were trying to take on the incumbent telco. So they wanted to build the voice over IP, build telecoms expertise. So you had always got an innovation going on, new tech stuff going on. It's hugely exciting. So I built my first company doing that. It was like effectively a professional services company. But very quickly realised that actually, you're going in pitching for contracts, winning contracts, and essentially they're buying you, your reputation, your relationship. Yeah. So that felt very hard to scale because one, I was winning these contracts and then we're trying to deliver these contracts, which I was involved in. And those contracts were finished, and then we have that empty pipeline to go and start selling again. And trying to do that, trying to get an organisation which supported that was extremely hard. So I thought professional services company maybe not, how can you empower things with technology? So that became my next one, which was then a mobile content company. But that was here at that point. So the story for here was during the career coach sessions, the byproduct of that 12-week navel gazing and the 6 months leading up to that and travel were three things. One was startup, as an entrepreneur, digital, and Asia. And I thought, where's the growth going to be? It's going to be in Asia, just coming back from traveling in Southeast Asia.
This was obviously probably around the time of the SARS crisis.
Yeah, it was probably just before, just after SARS. I had that piece, that post-it on my wall in 2003, 2004. And so for me, what did that mean? That meant, okay, startup. It meant something around internet and digital, and Asia for me was China. Because in 2004, the Chinese tech environment was booming, but also the openness to foreign talent was very open to foreign. They had a lot of foreigners going into China, either on the VC side or on the startup side, building businesses.
You imagine
it was very well
exciting time, right?
Yeah, it was hugely exciting. So I was then going back and forth from London to Shanghai, talking to VCs, talking to startups, and on every 2 or 3 months I go back, starting to get some interesting conversations going. And then at the same time, my wife's company, which is a large drinks company, Diageo, had a reorganisation. She was doing project management, change management roles, rolling out IT systems for Europe, Middle East, Africa. And so then they offered her the role to do that for 1 year for Asia Pac, take that experience, roll it out into Asia Pac. So then they offered her an expat package in Singapore, and I went, Singapore's boring. I don't want to be in Singapore, I want to be in real Asia, I want to be in China. But we thought it would be a lot easier to go from here to China. So we decided to make the move. And then, landed here, tried to build a network. Hugely frustrating trying to build a network here, because what I realised now and later on was that it was so transient, that people just didn't make the effort. You go and meet somebody like I'm used to network, and you can have a chat about something and share something afterwards, and nothing back. You keep sharing, nothing back. And I got frustrated by that. But I realised actually afterwards why that was. It was just because it is so transient. So why make the effort with people?
Because at that point, I imagine Singapore was more about serving kind of 2 to 3 year expat contracts. No one's really looking to set up roots here if you're an expat.
Exactly. People on 1 or 2 year contracts, there's hardship allowances.
Hardship.
I mean, I actually, I was very fortunate that part of the Diageo expat package that 1 year was like a resettlement budget for me. Learning new skills, new lessons, languages, whatever it might be. I had a budget as well, you know, to resettle in, to adjust this new life. But actually, it's obviously, you know, Singapore was not a hard place to adjust to. But from a professional point of view, it was quite hard because one, that networking, as I mentioned. Two was the startup environment, you know, and the tech environment. On the outside looking in, looked sophisticated. It looked like there was a lot going on. It was like this new high-tech city of Singapore. But actually on the ground, it was embryonic. You know, the startups were really students doing MBA courses, coming out of university, starting thinking about a lot of business plan competitions and this kind of thing. There was no real VC community or deals getting done. It was very much just a handful of angels. The government starting to, you know, support and do matching schemes and this kind of thing. But it was super early days.
Yeah. So I would have thought back in the region, or in Asia at that time, places maybe like Sydney or Shanghai, where you were spending a lot of your time, Hong Kong even, they maybe dominated that entrepreneurial ecosystem at that time, right?
I mean, China was where it was at. You know, there was so much going on in China in those days, from a tech point of view, from a startup point of view. You know, it was the rise of Alibaba, you know, and Tencent and WeGames. It was the start of all of that. And as I said, super open to foreign talent to come in and, you know, help build businesses in China. So whereas in Singapore was, you know, I reflect now, one of the interesting things I reflect on now is when I came here, a lot of conversations I had with people here was, you know, constantly comparing Singapore to Hong Kong. And Hong Kong not caring about Singapore because Hong Kong was already this monster, you know, large, you know, financial hub, you know, twice the population, you know, the stock exchange like 10 times the size of the Singapore stock exchange. Just completely different. No comparison. No comparison. It's Hong Kong. And now, it's happened in the last 5 or 6 years, it's just completely reversed with fortunes for two reasons. One, Singapore's just done a phenomenal job at, you know, reinventing itself and investing and just continuing to be open. At the same time, you know, Hong Kong shot itself in the foot and been crushed by China. So it's interesting.
It's a shame.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah, I love Hong Kong, and I think a lot of expats share that opinion. It's just such a shame to see the dramatic change in the scenery when it comes to the expat working environment.
It is. And then you talk to Hong Kongers here now. You talk to, you know, expats who moved from Hong Kong, long-time expats, and, you know, all very sad about what's happening there. A lot of people keeping their options open. It seemed, you know, it looked like, you know, 6 months ago, people were actually leaving Hong Kong. And it seems to be a little bit more about keeping options open, but for sure, the fortunes of Hong Kong.
I think if you're very wed to China from a business relationship, it does make sense to still be based in Hong Kong and serve the opportunity quite well. But we've seen it for sure.
There's still a lot of risk though, I think, associated with it. Still, I think it's played out here. Obviously 10, 20 years ago, it was like probably the largest, or 20 years ago plus, it was probably the largest city in China. Now it's probably number 12, and so then the consequences of 12 becoming 13 and 14 is not so high risk for China either. So I don't think, well, let's see how that plays out.
It's interesting though, you were given a hardship allowance back in Singapore back then, but I would have thought it makes sense in a way. You didn't have Boat Quay, you didn't have Marina Bay Sands, or you had Boat Quay, but you didn't have that vibrant ecosystem for expats at the time in Singapore. As you said, it was quite transient. Whereas you look at Singapore now, it's obviously, you know, done fantastically well to allow communities, expats to kind of, you know, set up.
Well, I mean, the whole, you know, I guess the country transformed. So there's been massive infrastructure investment. There's been massive investment in tourism, in arts, in culture, in entertainment, in the restaurant scene, the bar scene. All of that, you know, was fairly early stage. I mean, the whole marina area didn't exist. In those, it's the whole development is just phenomenal.
Absolutely.
And the population grew, you know, 4.4 to 5.5, 5.6 now, in a very, very short space of time. During the 2006, 2007, you know, massive population growth, where, you know, the country was booming, but also opened up its borders and, you know, and allowed a whole bunch of you know, people to come into the country, very, very open. And I was very fortunate to be part of that, you know, part of that group. So it has transformed a lot. And then if I think just about the whole tech and startup scene, that's just night and day difference. You have like 25k, 50k, 100k kind of matching schemes, and that was pretty much it. Now you just got like this breadth and depth and sophistication of, you know, financial support in terms of everything from 100k to hundreds of millions to B2B versus B2C, SaaS, deep tech, shipping, alternative protein, the whole thing is just completely explosive. And the ecosystem support does incubators, accelerators in terms of the whole block 70, 71, 72, 73, or the support mechanisms and co-working space. It's just a night-day difference.
Even for myself, I coincide my arrival here with Marina Bay Sands. When I came. And in the last 12 years, simple things like coffee. Back then you have Starbucks.
Are you a coffee snob?
I'm Australian, so it's kind of contradictory. And so you have Spinelli's maybe, and just getting a coffee that was a decent coffee for less than $10. And now you sport for choice. You go down to Gachong or Siglap, East Coast area.
You're a coffee roaster.
It's just crazy. So I think Singapore, you're right, I agree, has done really tremendously well in a short space of time. It's 10 years. It's not much.
Yeah, absolutely. It's carried on innovating and transforming during that time.
So getting back to your kind of journey in entrepreneurial ventures at that time, obviously I think the people that do know you recognize you for PropertyGuru. And so if you don't mind me kind of cutting into us, how did that
So I'd arrived in Singapore and getting disappointed by what was here in terms of sort of tech scene, startup scene. It was a fairly early stage. But I ended up investing in and then being asked to help and then asked to run a mobile content business, which is what I did. So it's a startup. I had some shareholders, local founders, and I was working with them, helping build their business until they had a falling out with original shareholders and changed the strategy and kind of became a shell company. And I still believe that our business opportunity still exists. Actually, it's mobile comics and comic communities. Creating and sharing comics, user-generated comics, as well as branded comics in essentially a community, build a community around it.
You may have just made an entrepreneur listening. Someone reading a comic at home.
I didn't have the passion or interest in selling comics. I liked the idea though. I think it was interesting. The founders had a slightly different perspective on where they wanted things to go, so there was the divergence. Anyway, separate story. So I was running that business, essentially a failing, undercapitalized business, where the founders and many of the team decided to leave because of falling out with shareholders. And then in 2007, the whole property market just exploded on the back of all this immigration and an economy booming as well. And so this part of the expat package was a nice allowance for housing, and so we were renting this fantastic property on Emerald Hill Road, an old condo. We had the top floor penthouse, 2 massive roof terraces, fantastic place as part of my wife's package. And the property went en bloc, essentially means it forced block sale. And so essentially 80% of the owners decide to sell, which forces the remaining 20 to sell. And so very quickly, this was happening across the whole of the island. You have $13 billion in about 2 years of en bloc fever that took place. So tearing down old condos and putting up new condos, and so on the back of the whole population growth. I think for the first time also, I think the single government was a little bit out of sync because this big population influx and also economic boom led to a massive housing boom and demand, and the supply just was not there on the private side. The supply was just not there on the HDB side. And so, 2 or 3 years later, there's a try a big catch up. Of course, it takes time to build, of course. So there's the big pressure squeeze. So because we had to then move out and look for someone new, the first thing I did as a fairly recently arrived foreigner in the country was to go online, because in Europe, where I come from, travel, cars, jobs, property, everything was online. We did everything online, and to my horror, there was nothing online. So searching for property, there wasn't anything. There was inches and inches and inches of newspapers, 3 lines of text, how things used to be maybe in Australia or in Europe.
You go to the classified section.
Classified section, 3 lines of text, with a marina, telephone number. And as a recently arrived foreigner, didn't really know the areas, what type of properties are available, what these things look like, how big they are. Villa Marina, a telephone number, is not very useful for me. And so I started then thinking about it. I thought, okay, I'm just a renter, right? So if I'm renting for 1 or 2 years, it's maybe less of a problem. But if I'm buying a property, I'm spending $500,000, a huge amount of money, the single biggest investment ever you make in your life on real estate in your home. and you don't have any information, 3 lines of text, massively stressful, no transparency. What's happening to prices per district, what's happening for sales, what's happening for rent. You don't have any information at all. You're basically outsourcing one of the biggest investments of your life to somebody else. You're saying, agent, please tell me what I should do.
You don't know, probably don't trust.
Agent is probably going to be selling you what they know and what you think you should have. The property developers are trying to sell you something. Your friends and family, with the best will in the world, will be trying to help you, but maybe don't have the expertise. And so you're completely and utterly out of control in a single biggest investment you're ever going to make, with no information, no transparency at all. Really big problem, really stressful problem. And so the more I researched and the more I started to realize actually this looked like a really big problem, right? And so I started to research and saw that around the world, France, Germany, Japan, China, Australia, these real estate bubbles already existed and had been around for maybe 5 or 6 years or 7 years beforehand. And the market leaders were generating 40, 50, as high as 70% net profits. Very cash-driven business model across multiple markets, multiple geographies. So it looked like interesting business model, translates multiple countries, and here, Southeast Asia, you've got 700 million people, population's growing, urbanization taking place, everyone needs a roof over their head, there's no transparency, big problem, $250 billion worth of real estate getting transacted every single year in a highly intransparent market. So highly valuable, and a lot of stress because no transparency, no information, no controls, no tools. So I put together a business plan, I pitched it to an investor friend who was one of the investors in this mobile comics business. And he introduced me to my co-founder. And I had sworn never to work with Finnish people before, I was a Finn. Because my first angel investment that I made in about 2003 was with a Finnish business. I had so many battles and frustrations with him. I'm not going to do that ever again. But anyway, we decided to just take it easy initially. Right? So he was dating his girlfriend, a real estate agent, so he had some interest in his space. He was a techie, and we thought, okay, let's do something part time. And then we went full time. End of 2007, and launched a very crappy website at the end of 2007. We bootstrapped it for many years. We didn't take a salary for many years. Didn't take any vacation for 7 years.
Wow. It's a Mark Cuban story. No holiday for 7 years. Basically.
Yeah, it was like a mini prison sentence, but hugely exciting and hugely scary and frustrating. But we bootstrapped it because there was no real VC community there. So we managed to persuade a group of individuals to put, because we weren't able to raise funding for just an internet play, as we were told. It's not going to work in Singapore. It's not going to work in Southeast Asia. You've got these giant media businesses. You've got MediaCorp owns TV. You've got SPH which owns print. And all the behaviours is offline. All the consumers are reading newspapers. All the agents are advertising in newspapers. All the developers are advertising in newspapers. And you're going to do something online. I mean, what is this online thing anyway? Internet marketing. What is that? So everyone we spoke to, well, it's not going to work. Thankfully, we found a group of individuals in high net worths who kind of believed in the story and the business plan. They put $1.2 million into the business, and they made 50 times their money. But they took a risk and they supported us, and without that, we would not. The commitment, ambition, and support that we had from them in the early days was fantastic. So without them, we would be harder.
It's really hard to imagine now. You think how advanced Singapore has become in terms of embracing technology. And you mentioned a lot of the hype around attracting VCs and a lot of tech startups here.
Yeah.
But to think, not that long ago, what was this, maybe 12, 15 years ago?
40 years.
People were still relying on a lot of the old methods of communication, newspapers. And don't get me wrong, that's how it was in many countries. But
absolutely.
I'd imagine it's probably more so just backwards back then. It's hard to believe.
It was. I mean, you think about one of my surprises was just banking. For many years, for the first 7 or 8 years, I was writing checks. We were writing checks all the time, and there was the company shop and everything, and it felt like a big step backwards in many ways. But there were early signs, so you had, for example, Yahoo, Southeast Asia was here. And they were operating across Southeast Asia. They're getting some advertising dollars from Unilever or Nestle, and there was a bit of an internet. There was a little bit. You had internet banking just starting. You had low-cost airlines just starting to pay with a credit card online, just starting. You had e-commerce in those days, a company called eBay, which now no one's ever heard of, I'm sure.
eBay
was e-commerce, right? You know, and so you had the early stages of consumer adoption, doing something online, but super early in those days.
And no one was doing it for property.
Yeah, no one was doing it for property, and there were no smartphones on it. You know, we had this old phones, Nokia's, the Sony Ericssons, the Motorola's, traditional,
pre-smart. Paid at $1 per SMS.
Yeah. And you had the rise of this social media thing called Friendster. And so Friendster was the choice of social media in those days.
And MySpace.
And MySpace, yeah. MySpace was less popular here, a bit more strong in the US, but here it was Friendster. And so, it was a very unusual, so I'm sure many people listening will be clueless about these names. But that's how it was. Yeah, so it was embryo. So we hustled, we kind of took on this momentous task, and through sheer grit and determination, I think it was 7 days a week, 12, 14-hour days. I spent more time with my co-founder than I did with my wife. We managed to get to a position where we built, a profitable, cash flow positive, profitable, leading, we had about 7% market share of all people start to use online after about 4 years. A few hundred thousand users. And we built, a strong business in Singapore, about 60 or 70 staff, nicely profitable company, growing at sort of 5x. It was a great position to be in, and we expanded from there into multiple markets and made even more mistakes as a result of that. And then obviously, skipping forward a lot now, engineered a whole succession plan, transition plan for myself, which was an interesting learning process in itself, very painful process for me personally, self-inflicted, but painful. And then I was most recently took the company public in March of this year, probably the worst possible time to do it. But
how has the going public gone for PropertyGuru?
It's gone very well. For a Southeast Asian company, started with just 2 people, to then 14 years later taking the company public and close to $1 billion, market cap. On the New York Stock Exchange, we I never thought would happen. Our expectation was when we started the business, we'd take the company public on SGX or ASX, and we had tried to take the business public on the ASX about 4 years prior to that. Just when we went $38 billion to 8, and we kind of went and pulled the plug at the last minute. Just beyond wildest expectations and dreams, just what we managed to achieve over that time for a small Singapore homegrown company, 2 people to take it, 1,500 people to take it public. But amazing just team effort that we've had, and loyalty and support from staff and customers to enable that. So we're now a public company, and we're operating as a public company would do. It's like a grown-up company with a grown-up board. We've got four or 5 independent directors, on the board, and it's a grown-up company now, and it's really exciting, and I feel very proud about what we've achieved, and just an amazing journey.
Yeah, you should. It's a great story.
Yeah.
I'd like to understand what was going on in your life at that time when you decided, right, I'm going to go out and start this property tech business.
Yeah. Well, I had this post-it note on my wall, right, which was startup, digital, Asia. And so whilst I had, I had always said to other founders, wannabe founders, there's the golden rules here. Right? So the golden rules are you choose a really big market, and you choose something you're really passionate in, an area you're passionate about and really know really well. So I chose Singapore, population of 500 people, tiny market. And I chose real estate, which I had no interest or passion or interest in or experience in. But what I did have passion and experience in was building a tech business. Essentially what PropertyGuru is a tech business. It just happens to operate in the real estate market. So that was the motivation, that was the driver. And so that kind of consumed a good chunk of 10 years of my life. But during that process, my wife was totally focused around having kids, which were not coming. Probably because I was working in the business. And so eventually, through a whole bunch of IVF journeys in Singapore and London and US, and eventually had twins. And so, thank you. And so I missed growing them up for the first sort of almost 3 years of their life. So for me, that was a catalyst to say, actually, if I want to be a good dad, I want to spend time with my kids and see them grow up and want to hang around with me, I probably have about 5, 6 or 7 years to really have quality time with them before they hate their parents because they're teenagers.
So never.
So what do I do before that? So that then led to a promise to my wife that by the time the kids are 5, I'll be out of the day-to-day operations. And so put in place a whole process to make that happen. So I'm thankful that 2018 was the year that I was able to sort of hand over operations and go through the transition process and sort of spend time again with my kids and my wife, and I think starting about what next. So, yeah.
Good to hear that. It's interesting the word you mentioned when it came to passion, and I've always had this belief, and maybe a lot of other entrepreneurs believe that you have to be passionate, but you weren't passionate really about property. You were passionate about building a business.
No, I was passionate about building a business.
You're passionate about building a business, but you weren't passionate about the industry properly.
No, I wasn't.
So what's to be said about someone who comes in and says, okay, I want to go out and build this business, I want to scale it, I see an opportunity, but I'm not really into it, but there's an opportunity there. You don't really need that passion, or do you need to find a passion for something related to it?
I think passion, fundamentally, you have to have, full stop. So in my case, I was passionate about building a business in the tech space, in Asia. And so PropertyGuru, to all intents and purposes, it's a tech platform. It just happens to be solving a consumer problem, which is around helping them navigate how they find and make a confident decision around property. But you don't need to be a property expert here. What I very quickly realized is you become the property expert. If you're living and breathing this, on day one, I didn't know anything about real estate, right? But through living and breathing it, 7 days a week for 1, 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, suddenly, all you're doing is you're talking to real estate agents, talking to property developers, talking to government, talking to industry associations, in their language about their issues. You're reading research papers, you're reading articles, you're publishing articles, you're talking to the consumers, you're getting their insights and their sentiments. So suddenly we become, individually, mini property gurus. We become, gurus around the real estate industry. Now, do I have the depth of knowledge? If someone really pushed me around the PSFs of retail in a certain sector, of Ho Chi Minh versus, of course I don't have that. But if you want to talk about macro, you want to talk about some of the macro trends, you want to talk about residential versus retail, some of the trends around the pricing around that, demands around that. I had that knowledge, and so I was being asked then to start talking on TV or on radio about these areas because I had gained that knowledge. I didn't need it to start the business. To start a business, you need to have a blind belief that that you can achieve something. You need to be confident there's a big problem to solve, and that there's an opportunity to solve that problem using technology in our case. And so I got conviction around that. I got excitement about that, and so that's what consumed me. That's what led to the passion was around building this business. We started with 2 people, and then became 10, and then 20. And you can see you're having an impact. You can see a number of users was growing. We had more customers, start paying revenue. We're able to see the first year we had $300,000 of revenue, and 1,000 paying agents. That became 4,000, and that became 10,000. And so the metrics, the growth, the competition. I'm a highly competitive person, and so the competition. So we had these big monster companies, of David versus Goliath. We were taking these big players on and trying to sort of disrupt their business model, and everyone will say it's not going to work. That was, for me, gave me something to prove. So that's what drove me, was around the passion to prove people wrong, to prove that actually it's time that they could grow and we take on this competition, fight the competition off, by innovating and staying focused around solving the consumer problem. And so how do we solve that? Well, keep innovating, keep listening, keep improving, don't ever rest. You're just going to keep innovating. As soon as you stop, as soon as you relax, that's when you start to die. And so complacency and arrogance, which it happens in all large companies as they start to get bigger and bigger. They become more around how do we manage risk? How do you think we're big enough and never going to lose our position? That arrogance and complacency and risk taking changes, and so you've just got to keep innovating and keep improving.
Yeah, it's really fascinating that point about not resting on your laurels. But what's to be said about a lot of people talking about burnout? I see it a lot as well. People who just go so singular into something, and truth be told, me as well. Just so singular, you absorb everything, you're in it, you just immerse yourself in that. Do you believe the importance of finding something outside of that to recharge you and energize you to bring that passion back into the business?
Yes. I think that's that's absolutely required in terms of having a healthy long-term passion for the business, in terms of having a relationship with your spouse or your friends or your family or kids, whatever it might be. Having the balance is absolutely key, but it's extremely hard. And I failed on that. I didn't succeed. I'm a workaholic, and I knew therefore that in order for me to get that balance, I could not continue running PropertyGuru. So if I wanted to spend time with my kids, I would not be able to do that whilst running PropertyGuru, just because of the way I behave. I'm not a good example of how to do this well. But I do have friends who are good at doing this, and they are far more strict and disciplined around time management, around carving time out for family, and carving time out for social and personal interests as well. Absolutely, that's really important. For me, I think and I had this conversation quite a lot with my parents, because they were concerned about just working all the hours across sense, and they were translating that into being stressed. And yes, it was stressful at times, but I really enjoyed it. I got that just being able to see the business evolve and see the business grow. And so it wasn't hard to kind of motivate me to get out of bed because I was passionate about it. But at some point, I think you do need to have some balance. I fortunately survived, and from a health point of view, I survived that. But in retrospect, probably wasn't very healthy, probably mentally or physically, because just everything's about business.
If you had to do that again, what would you have done differently?
I would hope that I would be able to carve a little bit of time out in my diary. It's blocked out for sports, exercise, family time, where I just switch everything off and just spend time on the other things. I don't know if I would do that or not. I hope I would. But that's the reason why I said I would not do that startup, because but I am kind of doing various startups now, but it's not me running it. It's not my business. I have a family office which is invested in climate tech. I'm just launched a fund with some other people, but it's not me full time. I'm 50% of the time on there and more the co-founder. It's a bit more balanced in terms of the work required.
Yeah. Do you believe that there's a kind of peak time or an average peak time for when someone should launch their business, or when entrepreneurs really kind of hit their stride? Are you a big believer that there was a certain age in their life or people's lives when that comes together, or could it happen really early? Could it happen much later?
So my personal perspective on this, I don't think there's any hard and fast rules about it. If you're passionate about something, you really think there's an opportunity here, then you should go and do it, no matter whether you're 20-something or whether you're 50-something. What the statistics tell you is the older you are, the more chance of success, to a point, to 60s. So if you start a business when you're 20 versus start a business when you're 30, from a probability point of view, founders who are in the 30s have a higher chance of success than founders in the 20s. Founders who are in the 40s starting a business have a higher chance of success than in the 30s. Founders who are 50s have a higher chance. Now, why is that? I guess you have more battle scars, you have more experience to draw upon. You've probably made a whole ton of mistakes already. You know how to build businesses. You know how to maybe scale. You know how to manage the challenges of an organisation from a politics point of view. You maybe stakeholder management. You're probably a bit more clued into. You probably maybe get less stressed about things because it doesn't seem all encompassing. Because actually you've been through something like that before, 2, 3, 4, 5 times already. You've been through 3 or 4, 5 down cycles already. You know what it's like. You've got
the t-shirt.
So I think there's a lot around experience. So something you said around, So the probabilities are the older you are to a point, the chances of success are higher. And also, I think the other thing that's like is around number of founders. Solo founder is you're less likely to succeed than if you've got multiple founders. I think 2.5 I think was the idea.
Yeah, I've heard 2.
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
Why do you believe that is?
I think just reflecting on my own personal experiences, it's around having a sounding board, having someone where you can just, when it feels like everything's ending in your world, just having that sort of that sounding board of someone you can speak to around, actually just venting and sharing things in a complete trusted environment. Because ultimately, both if it's 2 founders or 3 founders, all you in theory should care about if you have a trusted environment is the end ambition. So there's no judgment around, someone finding it hard to cope with something, someone's not. So I think there's that. There's also the bit around complementary strengths. So in my case, purely by accident, the person I was introduced to, my co-founder, he and I complemented each other 100%. On Myers-Briggs 8 boxes, we're polar opposites.
Oh wow.
And he managed the back office, operations, finance, product and tech. I managed all fundraising, business development, sales, marketing, and we just complemented each other from that point of view. We would get together on a Saturday or Sunday and sit in the office on the whiteboard and share problems. That complementary skills and strengths. 1, 2, I think just having someone who you can kind of act as a bit of support to, mentor to, or just emotional support to is absolutely critical.
And did you culturally share a lot of the same values and a lot of commonalities outside of the business?
100%. So it was more inside the business around what we want to achieve inside the business from a values point of view, from an ambition point of view, from a vision point of view, from at what point do you want to exit, what kind of business do you want to build. We had those conversations on a regular basis, including when we got trade sale opportunities. When someone comes along and said, "We'll buy you, $300 million, cash in hand, walk out the door." At that point is when you start to then make decisions based on it really tests things, because you have an opportunity to have a lot of money, but actually do you compromise values and ambition and vision? Ultimately we said no because we didn't want to. And so I think so we had a lot of shared values and visions around how to run a business, how to be done ethically, what kind of culture do we want to have in the organisation. Yeah, absolutely.
I can imagine that you're quite visionary at that time. A lot of companies probably just weren't focused on these things, they'll focus on the product, the end goal.
Yeah.
And you mentioned this earlier about you never believed or expected PropertyGuru could achieve the level of success it had. What were the expectations from day one? What was the end goal?
That we would have a relatively modest, within 5 to 7 years, exit, probably through a trade sale or a local IPO. The revenues at the time, I think we were talking about getting to something like a 20 million revenue business, and having something like 3 or 4 billion users a month or something. Now at 40, you're now close to a billion valuation, 100 and something billion revenues. So it's kind of order of magnitude different. So I think the thing that I took away from that was, well, actually it's taking longer than we expected. It was actually bigger than we expected. So and that's something which I do spend time with the founders I work with these days, the startups I work with these days, just reflecting a little bit on some of these things, which is actually, one, you don't have to rush as fast as you think you do, because actually, just things take a little bit longer, but can actually be a lot bigger. So just think a little bit bigger about things, but also think a little bit about longer things as well. So don't feel you have to do everything tomorrow.
Yeah.
Prioritize, focus, don't do 10 things at once and fail at 9. Just do 1 or 2 things really, really well, and just be really disciplined and focused around prioritization and walking before you can run.
It's encouraging to hear that, because I do find as well in my network, it's typically very entrepreneur heavy and consists of a lot of people who are on the cutting edge of emerging technologies, particularly climate tech, which we will talk about shortly. But it seems like sometimes it's a bit of a race. I've got to rush. I've got to be there. Oh, they've just done that. They've just raised $100 million. Well, okay, we only raised 30. Why not? So we have to do this. I don't see that sustainable.
No, it's not. It's not. And I think it's also not necessary, because things, unfortunately and unfortunately, because lots of people need to change and get things like climate tech adoption happening a lot faster. But the reality is, it just takes time. If you think about this whole digitization wave that companies have now been going through, it all started like 20 years ago. Large organisations hiring a chief digital officer, a CEO, and this person had no power, sat in a corner office somewhere, and basically tick, now done digital. It wasn't embedded in the organisation from a sort of transformation point of view. All business processes, all layers of the organisation become digitized. 20 years later, it's now like that. In most cases, in many cases, it is. And the same is now happening around sustainability. Companies are hiring a CSO, a chief sustainability officer. In many cases, they don't have the power yet, they don't have the team yet, they don't have the plans, they don't have the actions, they haven't translated the science-based targets, they haven't translated this into what does this really mean in terms of a transformation program for the company. It's day one of that. It just takes time. In the case of startups, what we did was, we went from 1 country to 4 countries. We spent 4 years doing 1 country, and in 4 months we've gone to 4, because we thought we had this healthy, maybe slightly unhealthy, paranoia that the barriers to entry for our business was just a website, right? So anyone could launch a website, and they were. Every month, every few months, there was a brand new version of a real estate website coming along. It was so paranoid that we were going to lose the position because the barrier to entry was so low. We thought. The reality is just the investment we made, the innovation we made, the product, the tech, the organic traffic, the 50,000 agents we had on one side, the property values. So we did have some barriers to entry, but we didn't appreciate it, I guess. And so we were in a massive rush. So we went for this one time, and we almost broke the company by doing it. So 2 years of hiring 250 people, losing 250, hiring another 250 people, hiring low quality people, maybe really at times maybe compromising values. The country manager was alcoholic in one country, the country manager was siphoning marketing budget to someone else, to his wife. Had someone working for 2 companies at the same time. As I said, we hired, we lost, we rolled out our platform in Singapore to the other markets. And of course, people in Bangkok don't look for condos by condo name or HDBs, they look for areas, Sukhumvit, Ceylon, Tongluo. They're not looking for,
prestigious names.
So it was just different. So we went through all of that, rolling out apps for consumers on Android and iPhone, multiple languages, rolling out different versions of the website, which then became 4 different versions of the website, not 1 version of the platform. We made a lot of mistakes. And the lesson out of that was if we'd gone from Singapore to the next market, we reconsidered about which market, doubled down on that market, built a really strong number 2, then gone on to the next one, would have been just as strong. I'm pretty sure of that, and a lot less stress, and a lot less pain. We've spent 2 years effectively mopping up the mess that we created, to rebuild morale, to rebuild the innovation engine that was there, to build a leadership team, to get in place process and system. It just wasn't necessary. We didn't need to run. If we'd just been a lot more considered about things, we would. If we waited 4 years to go into one of these other markets like Thailand or Indonesia, it wouldn't have made any difference.
I think we're more thoughtful, not doing it because we feel, hey, we're going to miss out. We need to do this. But really, what's the intent? What's the goal behind it?
Because quite often you see investors pushing the founders to go, okay, now you've proven it now, one market, now roll it across 10. And then what ends up happening is you have 10 pins on the map with a very thin business with no depth. And so when money starts to run out, you go, well, actually, what have you got now? It's so stretched, doing 10 different things at the same time. Whereas if you say, I've got a really strong business in one market, you can build the next one. I'd rather have a business that has 2 strong, profitable, fast-growing bases rather than 10 pins on the map would look nice. It's more sustainable, right?
It's also more enjoyable.
Yeah.
You're going to have a happier business. Your culture is going to be more enjoyable.
Absolutely.
People are going to be retained. They're going to do better. The rewards will be there. And it is interesting. I find those discussions with my partner we have quite often as well about, let's just really focus on being great at Asia. Why go out and do Europe? But it's distracting. You can see what's going on in the US or Europe. And go, wow, okay, there's billions and trillions there. We need to be there. But why? What if we just do this really well?
Really, really well. And leverage the brand, the network, the relationships that you already have in those markets to extend. And that's been very much the approach that we've taken to PropertyGuru. We're not in a big hurry to add the next number 6 market, number 7, or number 8. And what we are really excited about doing is, we've got a strong brand, we've got a team already, we've got product tech already, focused on Vietnam, for example, or Singapore, Malaysia. How do you leverage that? Well, then let's try and do something more for the property developers there. Leverage the brand, leverage relationships. Can we do more of the banks there? Can we do more of the valuers? Can we do more of the... And so you leverage what already exists. It's a lot easier than going to a brand new market and learn from scratch.
Absolutely.
Make the same mistakes again and start when you have nothing.
And I can't imagine it's easy to replicate. So you kind of say, great, we've done well in Singapore. That means we can just do the same in Malaysia and have that success.
That cut and paste thing does not work.
Especially in Southeast Asia.
Hiring and organisation development is different. The competition is different. The regulatory environment is different. The behaviours of consumers are different. And so every market in Southeast Asia, unfortunately, is different. It's highly fragmented.
Fun but challenging.
Yeah, it is. But if you manage to build something that acts as a great barrier to entry,
absolutely. When we touched earlier about ages for entrepreneurs, and I don't want to go into this too much, but it made me think about how a lot of people, not just their age, but a lot of people, when it comes to starting a business, and I have these discussions a lot with people as well. A lot of my candidates, obviously, who are transitioning from a really secure role to maybe a new development platform, which might be deemed more risky, or people just switching industries.
Right.
I think a lot of people overestimate the challenges.
Yeah.
I'd like to get your thoughts on that, but what do people need to know about not overestimating things when it comes to making a switch, starting a business, changing industries, from your experience?
Well, first of all, I think it's human nature for a lot of people to think about all of the downsides, all of the complexities, to be overwhelmed by things. You know, if I reflect on, okay, I was in a, you know, built my career in a really big job, a reputation, and you know, and then traveling for 6 months, all of the fear and reasons not to do it beforehand. I was like really stressed about this. It was such a, you know, am I making the wrong decision? And I did it. It was the best possible thing that happened to me because it opened up my mind to something else. It opened up new challenging ideas about how I could do something in my next career. So, and then the same again, you know, when I then started my entrepreneurial life, you know, and build my own businesses, it seemed like it was just awe-inspiring about where do you even start this, and slowly, because you focus on something, you become the expert, you learn, you adapt, you make mistakes very quickly. So the actual risks are really low. And I guess the same happened when I went from, you know, PropertyGuru to then stepping back. I felt like an enormous risk. Why am I, you know, my ego became to the fore, which I didn't realise I had. You know, I actually realised I enjoyed talking. And there's lots of on TV or radio. I miss all of that, talking at town halls, I miss all of that, you know, big leadership table and, you know, making decisions together, the team, miss all that. Lots of reasons not to do something. But, you know, every time it's been just a better outcome, every time. And, you know, going from PropertyGuru into climate tech, I went through exactly the same process again. I like, where the hell do I start? You know, because I started looking at it and started listening to podcasts and started researching. And it's just absolutely overwhelming. You know, you've got like climate impacts every single part of society. Consumers, businesses, investors, governments, everyone has a role to play. Every single industry needs to decarbonise and think about that. And just think about it, big companies, small companies, governments, countries, everything. It's just, where do you start? You know, and I was talking to, you know, speaking to a climate scientist who's been studying it for 25 years. And I'm coming on to him, I want to get involved in this. You know, how stupid am I? I'm talking to someone in long duration storage, then it's focused on batteries, and they're focused on, you know, one part of the battery technology. And you know, there's science involved. It's like there's biology from nature based, you've got chemistry, hydrogen, you've got, you know, CO2 and NO2, and you know, there's a lot of chemistry involved. And there's a lot of physics involved.
You're putting people off from wanting to go.
I know. I'm going to get to the button in a minute. You know, so I'm just explaining the journey I went through is like just absolutely overwhelming. I thought, how the hell am I going to play along? Where do I even start? Because it's just a complete, just all-encompassing. So, you know, I guess the reflection I came to, having had all these conversations, started my research as well. You know, how do I then start to play to some of my strengths? So I thought, okay, well, I've built businesses. I built businesses using technology, and I've been angel investing, helping startups for a long time. So I understand startups in investment and also business building. So maybe I can apply that to this space. So then I started then, you know, angel investing in this space. And so that gave me the opportunity to meet all these, you know, really passionate founders who are trying to work in the climate tech space and trying to solve, you know, problems around decarbonisation. And I, through that, I was able to maybe make a small investment in these companies, start working with founders, learn some of the issues they're facing, and start to do that and help them. And that's kind of how I started. And through that process, you know, then you start to, you know, get exposed to new industries. You get exposed to, you start to build your knowledge base. You start to meet other people in the space. And very quickly, it snowballs. And so when you start saying, well, actually, I'm not talking about tech anymore. I'm now talking about climate tech. Then people who have an interest in climate will still naturally be drawn to you. You have the conversations. And I would sit there, and I still do 4 years later, you know, feeling this massive, you know, imposter syndrome, because I just feel like I have such a superficial layer of knowledge of this space. And I'm still learning, I'm still absorbing. But you know, through the journey, I've been able to pick it up. I mean, you know, I think it's natural to overestimate, and there's lots of reasons not to do something. All these perceived risks, but actually, if you're interested and you're passionate about it, you can play a role. And in many of the cases, what I now realise is the businesses that we're building, whilst in the climate tech space, they don't have any kind of rocket science at all. It's taking a solar panel and bolting it to to a pump, a water pump. It's around an IoT sensor to help with energy efficiency. You know, it's around how do you get solar panels on more roofs. And there's existing technology, you know, but we have to go and, you know, create something new, because we will do eventually, but you don't have to reduce emissions by 50%. Technology already exists. So the issue is not about technology, it's not about climate tech and science, or R&D, or nuclear, or carbon capture. It's about how do I get more solar panels on roofs? How do I replace a diesel generator on the construction site with a battery? How do I get, you know, a diesel water irrigation system in place with a solar irrigation system? None of that's rocket science. You know, get energy efficiency sensors that can turn the lights out, turn the aircon out, turn the, you know, food, you know, the kitchen exhausts off, you know, run the fridge better. None of that's rocket science. It's just basic software and IoT hardware in that case. And so you don't need as much tech knowledge as maybe you think you do. What you do need, in this case, in my case, is how do I get adoption? How do I get from one farmer to a million farmers? How do I get from one factory using energy efficiency to 100 to 1,000 factories?
A lot of it's based on scale.
Yeah. And the only way to do that is business model innovation and solving a real business problem. So we don't even talk about climate, we don't even talk about sustainability. We say, okay, you're a farmer, you're earning $100 a month. If we can help you earn $125 or $135 a month by replacing your diesel pump with a solar irrigation pump, does that help you? And so they have a very material and, you know, quick impact in that case. So suddenly you get one farmer going to 1,000 farmers, because actually the benefit is immediate. They have more money in their pocket, more money to feed their family, more money for education, healthcare, for their family, or for the community. So it has a secondary impact. In the case of the factory, we're operating razor-thin margins with rising energy costs. If you can, you know, save 30% of your energy consumption, immediately goes to the bottom line.
There's practical, tangible impacts right away.
Yeah, it's business impacts. How do you get more revenue? How do you get a better price? How do you get a better yield? How do you get more productivity? How do you reduce your cost? And don't even mention sustainability, because no one in Southeast Asia or Asia, bar a handful of companies, is buying sustainability or buying climate tech. No one.
Yeah, I'm glad you said that. I think that's going to be the elephant in the room for this industry.
Yeah.
And from at least my experience working in a recruitment setting in climate tech, I do get the impression that a lot of new businesses, a lot of new companies coming into this space have not worked up to the goal of sustainability. But as we said earlier, we need to be more sustainable, or we need to have a head of sustainability, head of ESG.
Yes.
Our board says this, so we need to do it. But they haven't thought about what that matters for the business to work up to that. It's almost reverse engineered. And it sounds ironic to say, but it isn't sustainable to operate like that.
Yeah.
So what's the mindset that business owners or leaders or people at the table who make those decisions should start instilling to be more orientated towards, as you said, making practical impacts for the right reasons?
Yeah. Well, I think there's two answers to that. So one is, I think the large companies and governments a little bit around, you know, walking the talk, putting those words into action. And it's not, and I'm oversimplifying, because, you know, if you've got an organisation of 10,000 people, 100,000 people, having a cultural change program, transformation, that starts at the top. If you've got CEO or C-level buy-in, then eventually things will change in the rest of the organisation. But obviously getting that buy-in, actually, this is not just another fad, it's going to be gone again in a year's time. You know, in itself, you know, get the stakeholders on board, and then start to really implement a change program internally in a large organisation. It's not trivial, but really being serious about it, committed to it, and putting budget to it, and just talking about it day in, day out, and actually making sure that the organisation does change, and making hard decisions as a result at the top. You know, so no longer is this bank going to be funding fossil fuels for the next 20 years. You know, but no, we want to carry on funding fossil fuels, but we are now an eco-warrior. I mean, that kind of thing is bullshit. Yeah. And so connecting the walk and talk, which is absolutely fundamental for the climate tech companies I work with as well, because, you know, their biggest frustration is that company X, all they're talking about is sustainability. On the ground, nothing's changed. You know, there's always lots of reasons why not to do things. And so the largest challenge that the startups have is getting their first, you know, 5, 10 customers, because invariably it's herd mentality. You know, a large company comes along and says, okay, who are your customers? So, well, we've got a proof of concept over here. It's not good enough. If you say, well, I've got company X, Y, Z, you know, these ones are doing it, then suddenly the trust and credibility in risk, or perceived risk, goes away. So companies are more willing to adopt. So which is why part of it is changing the narrative around don't talk about climate change, don't talk about decarbonisation, don't talk about sustainability on the ground, talk about business benefits. Translate your product into a business benefit, because that will accelerate the adoption. So I think, as you know, because you're in this space, it's going to require one big team effort from everybody, from consumers, from governments, from companies, from startups and entrepreneurs, investors. Everyone needs to play their part. But what I find most frustrating is just as large companies talking but actually not acting.
I 100% agree with you. I see a lot of that. There's too much talk, not enough action. I mean, I won't go into the whole topic of the energy transition in terms of what I think my opinion could be done better, or your opinion. But when you start a property guru, I want to ask this question, and I think this will help a lot of people right now who are maybe on the fence about what to do with their careers, what's good about launching a business, whether it's in climate tech or anything else. But what did you run in your mind in terms of the worst case scenario if property guru went, pear-shaped, totally bust, didn't work out?
Worst case scenario is I missed out on 12 or 24 months of salary, and that's about it. Because the upside is I learned more in that first 18 months of building PropertyGuru than I did in the previous 5 or 6 years of corporate life. Because every day you're making mistakes, making things up. There's no playbook for building PropertyGuru. There wasn't one. So how do you do it? Well, you make it up. You talk to people, you get advice, you listen, you adapt, and then you experiment and you learn. How do you build a customer service team when you don't have any cash, or how do you build a product development team when you don't have an office? How do you attract talent when you don't have any money or brand or customers? I learned so much building PropertyGuru, particularly in the early years, that that the previous 10, 15 years of my career wasn't able to teach me. So I came out as a far more rounded, experienced leader and entrepreneur than I would have done if I hadn't started. So if it failed, I would have gone to the next one. That was my wife's worst scenario, but that was what I was going to do. Question of whether she carried on funding me, but I was fortunate also to have the fact that she was earning a salary. That also gave me freedom. But again, that's a reflection a little bit of this age thing again. Right? So a lot of people say, "Well, I'm a bit too old now to start. I've got too much to lose now." But actually, in many cases, you have a little bit more buffers. We downsized, right? So we went from this lovely, massive, 6,000 square foot penthouse down to this tiny walkout, which was like $1,500. My wife was pregnant with twins, she's tiny, walking up this walkout. We had no aircon, we had no hot water. We downsized. So it's possible, right? It means some sort of stuff. But I learned so much through that process. So the downside risk seems high, but actually it's very low. And I have this conversation all the time about a large company. Someone from a large company looking at startups, they'll always start it's a bit more risky. But you will have the impact you'll have in that company is going to be enormous. You're going to shift needles on whether it's product tech, whether it's marketing, whether it's sales. You'll shift needles, add an extra 10% to their revenue, 20% to the revenue, or you're going to create a strategy that didn't exist, or open up a brand new market that didn't exist, build a team from scratch.
You really do something.
You really have a it's being a really, it's a big cog in a small machine, basically, and a massive impact. And then what's the downside risk? Okay, so the business doesn't work out in 12 months, what do? You've got more information, you've got more experience, more battle scars, which will support you if you want to go back to corporate or go to another startup. The downside, it's very easy to overestimate those risks and perceived risk beforehand, but actually it's very low. And in many cases, large organisations will also go through
doesn't guarantee you security as well.
And restructuring and all that kind of stuff. And without any politics, in many cases, without any politics or bureaucracy that you have to encompass in a large organisation.
Yeah, I think about this obviously very often in my space and helping a lot of people with various moves. And I won't mention, of course, his name, but good friend of mine who actually became a candidate and managed to secure him a move to a new development platform. He's individual big banks his whole career pretty much. Right. And we got to the point where he's like, well, it's decision time, can we chat? Let's grab a beer, let's chat. And I just asked him one simple question. I said, okay, sure, you know, early mid-40s, you're not super young, but you're not super old. What happens if you don't make this move 5 years from now? What would you think about it? And he just said, yeah, I think I regret it. I said, that's it. That's it right there.
Yeah.
That regret is a horrible feeling. It's too powerful.
It is.
Versus the fact that, oh, you know, I've got to downgrade to a 100 square foot HDB. I've got to change my lifestyle.
Yeah.
I've got to go without a car.
There's always lots of reasons not to do something, not to make that decision, not to make that leap. And I remember one thing that probably you, it might sound a bit trivial, but for me it was quite an important life lesson at least. I was so crazy busy at Probably Guru through this entrepreneurial organisation I was part of. I had the opportunity of going to Necker Island to meet Richard Branson, and being part of like a weekend on Necker Island and all that sort of stuff. Right. And I ummed and ahed, and I actually said, I'm just too busy, I just can't do it. I want to take some time from my family. Lots of reasons not to do something. I think I absolutely regretted that. And to the point of it chewing me up. I cut out the article, put it on my wall. I said, I'm not going to do that again. I'm not going to.
So when Elon
seize the moment, right? If you have those kind of opportunities, just seize them.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I really don't want to go.
So when Elon Musk gives you that invite, you're going to definitely go.
Well, I'll tell him when he stops launching rockets into causing even more pollution.
That's something we haven't enough time. So we better wrap this up. But maybe just to let people know in the audience, can you tell us a bit about the family office you started, the Climate Tech Fund?
Yeah.
What's interesting you, where you're spending your time, what excites you in that space?
Sure. Yeah, so about 4 years ago, as I said, I went on this climate journey and I started to invest through the family office into the climate tech space, and we made about 20 investments in climate tech startups at various stages, from seed stage to Series B, everything from $100,000 revenue to $20 million revenue and everything in between, but all focused on decarbonising one part of an industry, whether it's food or whether it's F&B or whether it's alternative protein food space or building construction, etc. So all focused on doing that. Super passionate founders, great fun to work with, challenging but just great fun. What I realised though during that process was, okay, to help the founders, as I like to do, with the scaling challenges, with their own personal development, with organisational development, with business development, fundraising, doing that across the portfolio 20 is very hard. I'm not scalable, it's not sustainable to do that. Unfortunately. So I very quickly realised that it would have a really big impact, and to really scale this, doing it me, myself, and I doesn't work. So in that process, I was one of the companies that I invested in was an energy efficiency company focused on the F&B space. It was a spin out from Engie through their factory, which is their venture builder. And so I got to meet the guys who helped build this business from scratch, just an idea. And they were thinking a little bit about, well, at some point we want to come to something a little bit bigger, because Engie was a little bit focused on a small area and reducing geography. And they had ambitions to do something global based, to do something in the decarbonisation space, broadly decarbonisation rather than energy focused. And so we started talking, and then actually through that process, about 12 months later, we ended up launching a fund, a climate tech fund focused on South Asia. So it's to two people who were running the venture builder in Engie. It was myself and another entrepreneur who was helping Wavemaker, which is a fund, VC fund here. And then all of us had kind of similar perspectives. We all had kids and family, and we're increasingly shit scared about what the future will look like for our kids. So we all wanted to play a role in trying to impact it. So they all had that same common vision. I mean, we brought the managing partner of Wayback Partners on the journey as well, who's now the evangelist as well. But initially a little bit, well, this is just impact. It's basically equals philanthropy, equals CSR, equals you can't make money from it. Actually, now okay, $1 trillion opportunity. I can build a really nice business, really nice fund from it. So then we launched Waymaker Impact. So Waymaker Impact is initially focused on Southeast Asia and decarbonising Southeast Asia. So think about Southeast Asia, a growing population, growing to 700 million people, rapidly urbanising. So you've got this massive building and construction boom taking place, energy consumption exploding, people getting AC for the first time, getting fridges for the first time, getting motorbikes or cars for the first time. So massive food consumption increase, consumer consumption increase, business consumption increase, rising middle classes who are now more affluent, wanting to buy stuff. Yeah. So you've got this growing population, one side, On the other side, you've got those emissions per head growing from 5 tonnes per head to 7, 8, 9, 10. So you've double whammy there. So you've got so emissions in sanitation can explode. And at the same time, we're home to about a third of the global carbon sinks in terms of forests, in terms of peatlands, in terms of mangrove, seagrass, and that's rapidly disappearing. So you have a look at this triple whammy, like in terms of this emissions heads and also carbon sink. And then, we're going to bear the brunt because, we're heavily reliant on agriculture, which is increasingly threatened from climate change. We've got 120 million people living on coastlines in Southeast Asia. You've got 3 of the largest cities, Jakarta, Ho Chi Minh, and Bangkok, sinking. And so we're really going to bear the brunt here. And you're seeing the effects of the climate change, accelerating in front of our eyes, right? And you say, okay, so what's being done about it today? Well, 2% of the total climate tech investment funding today goes in South Asia, 2%. Tiny, it's a drop in the ocean. And of that 2%, 2/3 goes into EVs. There are hundreds of EV companies being created and invested. So entrepreneurs and money are focused on this one space. But actually 90% of the emissions is elsewhere. It's food, agriculture, land use, manufacturing and building construction space. So because the money's not going there, and because the entrepreneur's not going there, Waymaker Impact still steps in to decarbonise those areas. And so what we do is we invest either at a very, very early stage in businesses that we can help accelerate, almost like a co-founder, or we actually build from scratch. And we have about 50 areas where we think we can build something which we call 100 by 100 companies. 100 megatons of emissions and 100 million revenue companies. So these have to be ultimately addressing a big opportunity, a big challenge, but a big opportunity. And so, just in context, 100 megatons equals twice the size of Singapore. So we're making the job very hard for ourselves, but if we really want to shift the needle, we have to be ambitious about it.
Absolutely.
So we want to build a portfolio of about 50 of these companies, which can mitigate up to 10% of the global greenhouse gases. Starting with Southeast Asia. Now we work with experienced entrepreneurs. We're not training entrepreneurs. We're working on to build 2 or 3 companies already, or build businesses in a large corporate, and we work alongside them and help them build a climate tech startup. So in the period of from day one, it's just an idea on that piece of paper, to 4 to 6 months later, there is a business which has got revenue-paying customers at the end of it. We'll fund it and we'll help grow it for the next 18 months.
So you would come in and help these companies at Series A or pre-seed?
No, pre-seed or blank piece of paper.
Oh, okay.
And a blank piece of paper with an experienced entrepreneur, venture capital team, we will then work and build that out for them. So far, we're on to our 4th venture. The first 3 out of 4, not surprisingly, in the agricultural space, and food space. The 4th one is going to be something around solar, probably renewable energy, and probably cooling in the sort of real estate space to be decided. It's week 3 of that venture, still finding out where the opportunity might be, but actually it's getting some really interesting ideas now. So by the end of this year, we're going to have 4 ventures, 3 agriculture, food focus, 1 around renewable energy, cooling. And so we've been building the team, we've been recruiting founders. Our biggest worry, to be frank, was can we find experienced entrepreneurs in the region who now want to do something in the space? So the first call for entrepreneurs, we had 200 entrepreneurs apply. Second call was 160 apply. So each time we chose 1. And so that's and then we're fundraising, so we're closing, do a first close imminently on the fund. And so we're looking for corporate partners, we're looking for entrepreneurs, we're looking for people to join and support, and also obviously investment. So, but if anyone's interested at all in this space, the door is open. Anyone who wants to make the leap into the sustainability space, wants to think about climate change, climate tech, I'm very happy to talk to them because we need more people doing more things, action, not talk.
I completely agree. I'm excited just listening to it. I'm sure there's many things we can do together in the future as well.
I hope so.
Yeah, absolutely. It's exciting times. Before we go, what is the best advice you've ever received in your life? I should have asked this question first.
Oh my god, okay. I don't know, I think combination of 2 things. We want to be just do it, just try. And the second one's a little bit more related to founders because I guess it's very drummed into my head and also through my own personal experiences to focus on the big problem. Yeah. And so the big obvious problem to me, 14 years ago, was super obvious when I started research. It was probably Europe, and the one now is climate change. Massive opportunity.
Yeah, we definitely need the best advice on this, that's for sure.
Yeah.
Steve, absolute pleasure, and I wish you all the best.
Thank you.
You clearly have a lot now to do. So no doubt you'll succeed, and yeah, just wish you a lot of success in the future for yourself and those around you.
Great. Thanks very much for the opportunity as well. It's been great fun.